Okay, I'm going to throw a name out at you, and I want you to tell me what this name means to you on your journey.
Okay.
Kris Jenner.
Ooh, so when I first started posting on TikTok, I was doing it for fun. I kind of knew I wanted to have a platform to talk to smart, ambitious women about things, but I didn't know how to get started, and I was experimenting on TikTok with trends, and I was not very good at it. Well, I thought it was kind of funny, but apparently TikTok didn't because I wasn't getting views. But then 3 weeks into this 100-day challenge where I was posting every single day, I decided to start talking about business. Kate, our mutual friend, is one of the people who pushed me to talk about business, which is what I really want to talk about. But I wasn't sure if anybody would listen to that on TikTok. So I was telling her, she was like, go for it. She showed me this Will Smith motivational video on YouTube, and I was like, all right, I'm down. And so I was thinking about how to make business more binge-worthy and digestible and fun and engaging on TikTok, how to TikTokify the business things I want to talk about. And I saw there were some accounts that were popping off because they were covering the Kardashians. And I thought, what if I combine the two? So then I started to go into the Kardashians and their empire and their various businesses over the years. And then I was actually kind of inspired by Kris Jenner's whole, masterminding thing. And I started to unpack her journey and trajectory and everything she's built. So I posted a video about it, and that was actually the first business video I posted that went viral. Before that, I made this kind of off-color joke about dating Asians, and that went viral for all the wrong reasons, but then I had to take it down, so.
When you say you had to take it down, is that personal sanity? Or did you say something in that video that kind of went against your character?
Ooh, it was kind of both. It was a facetious thing about how Asian men are underrated in the dating pool. It's the kind of thing where maybe I'll joke about it with friends, but it's not the kind of thing I want to present online in case it is offensive or hurtful to people. And then I got a lot of comments that were either angry or very flirtatious, and I didn't want any of that energy, so I took it down.
What's funny hearing you talk about this is I remember when I was growing up, I was playing baseball competitively, and a friend of my team, he used to put out these comedic, kind of these gory, rated R type raps, but just for fun. And his parents were always like, what are you doing? You're going to ruin your opportunity with businesses and your career. Yet this is truly what he loves to do, and he's good at it. And it's crazy how now in 2022, if you put out the thing, regardless of what other people might think, if you put out the thing, the algorithms are so good at finding the right people for you. And yes, you'll get some annoying comments and maybe it might feel not that great, but I feel like if you started today, it'd be so different. TikTok helped you find your pocket so well. And it's so interesting how it's been, only a year that TikTok's helped you find this pocket so quickly. And so the question that pops into my mind is, how do you deal with maybe fame in your pocket, in your world where you hadn't dealt with that before? What does that do to you mentally or psychologically?
I think there are two things that question brings up. One is I often feel like I'm being given more credit than I deserve, not in sort of a way where I'm downplaying the value I bring to the table, but at the end of the day, even today when I post a video, I'm I don't know if this is useful to anyone. To me, this seems obvious, but I'm going to post it, and usually people respond well to it. And also the fact that so many people I used to admire and follow and try to email and get time on their calendar, it's really opened a lot of doors where it's a lot more accessible for me to connect with the people I want to connect to, and they admire me and they follow my content. And so that has been interesting to me. First of all, it's nice, of course, but is there some element to TikTok where, because people don't expect substantive, interesting, insightful content, that my content therefore stands out, which makes people give me too much credit? Because if you were to see these business threads on Twitter or in a Substack, it would be kind of run-of-the-mill content. But I feel like I've basically leveraged what I call platform arbitrage. So that's the kind of thing where I'm I really appreciate all this recognition. Sometimes I'm you guys are hyping me too much. And then the other thing that it makes me think is maybe it's a little bit of pressure, because now I have to keep up with this. Now I have to keep taking it to the next level. The more I realize people in the industry follow my content, the more it's actually maybe mostly good, because it kind of sets the bar at a high level for me in terms of the quality I want to put out. But it's been kind of very accelerated. And I think that's just the most surprising part is on TikTok, lots of people have millions of followers, but I think I'm in just such a specific niche that I get to benefit from that, but I didn't think I would at this stage.
Truly, that reason there is why I was so excited to chat, because you talk about platform arbitrage, but I think just in general, there's the media will always guide how we think or what we look at or what we anchor. If someone has 200K, now it's kind of considered whatever. If they have over 1 million, it's okay, they're doing something. here's someone like yourself who is, I think I just checked, you have like 95K on TikTok, and obviously 95,000 people, you fill 2 arenas, that's crazy. But your influence in the space that you're in is insane. When I'm in those pockets, your name just keeps coming up in those pockets. So to the person outside, they'd be like, here's someone doing a green screen video. She has 95K, whatever, swipe. But no, you realize the substance and you realize the relative impact on how we've anchored these numbers. So interesting. How a lot of people wouldn't think that you're doing as well as you're doing. You have as much influence as you're doing, yet the opposite is just so true.
Yeah. The way I think about it is I punch above my weight class in terms of like the influence I have and also the brand deals I'm able to get because I have a very focused niche and I deliver a certain amount of value in that very specific niche that is more B2B, if you will. And that's really taught me like, we think about going viral on TikTok as being the end all be all of the platform, but actually quality matters just as much, if not more, compared to quantity of views, following, whatever. Like another example in the lifestyle space that I think is a good example of that is Tinks. She has like over 1 million followers on TikTok. Lots of people have over 1 million followers. Sometimes I find people who are completely random, nobody ever talks about. They have millions of followers on TikTok and they probably just got there randomly during like early 2020 when we were all locked down, you know? And now they're trying to figure out like who they are and how they stand out. But Tinks has disproportionate influence over like a certain kind of demographic because she has hit a certain kind of niche. And I am more in the business space, and I'm not comparing myself to Tinks necessarily, but only to illustrate the idea that quality is really important.
So important. So we were talking before, you're saying who you've been able to connect with and people you were trying to learn from, the people that were your heroes are now the people that are friends. And you know what it brings me back to? I was talking to Kate earlier this week, and she was saying a lot of us come out of university and we say, we can't meet anyone. Like there's not enough people to meet. I can't go to a party. Who do I meet? And she goes, just start creating content on TikTok and it'll find people for you. Even if you don't go viral, who cares? But it'll find the right people for you. So start creating content and look at everything that you created, which is amazing. But you talk about platform arbitrage. What do you mean when you say platform arbitrage?
What I mean when I say platform arbitrage is I think there are certain kinds of content we associate with certain platforms, with YouTube, with Twitter, with LinkedIn, with Substack, with Instagram, right? But I actually think that especially when there's a new emerging platform like TikTok, obviously it's massive now, but you could still say it's emerging relative to some of the incumbents. I think that there's still such a window of opportunity to take the kinds of content that work on other platforms and before they're quite so saturated on that new platform to be like the first mover in that space. So one person I think about, actually a few come to mind, but I think his name is pronounced Trung Fan, but he's on Twitter and he does these business threads, right? And he's like really well known for that. So I love that. And that's the kind of thing you don't see on TikTok. So I thought somebody needs to do something similar on TikTok. Or Packy McCormick with Not Boring. Or the Acquired FM guys. I'm obsessed with their podcast. Any kind of like interesting business. LinkedIn, obviously, you see a lot of that stuff. But I think figuring out what you want to talk about and is there a new emerging platform where that niche is not quite so saturated, like I think you can put your strategic hat on and really maximize that opportunity. And I think that's what I accidentally stumbled upon because I was on TikTok, but then I was like, I don't want to do what people typically do on TikTok. I want to do my own thing. I don't know if it'll work. Let's try it out. And it turns out it did work. So.
Okay. So on that point, I was listening to a bunch of podcasts that you were on before to try to get a better understanding of what you care for and what you think about. And you had this quote, and now this quote is going to sit in my musings forever. Because you said one of your favorite quotes is, if there's a book that you want to read that hasn't been written, like you need to write it. And I think this is what you're getting at. And it's so interesting because if you find creators, I think, who have that same mindset, it feels like the opportunity is minimizing burnout because you're saying the stuff that you want to say anyway, but maximizing the opportunity to do so well because there's so many people in the world. And if I feel like this, as you've seen, there's so many people that are like, oh, Dulma more, Dulma podcast, Dulma get on here, get on stage, Dulma more. When did you come across that quote and what was it about that quote that, let's call it like sparked you into action?
That's such a great little nugget that you pulled out. And thank you for doing that. I want to say it's a Toni Morrison quote that I'm paraphrasing because I consider myself a writer in my heart of hearts. I love writing. I love literature. I haven't done it in a while. And one piece of advice from Toni Morrison that's pretty famous is if there's a book you want to read and it doesn't exist, you have to be the one to write it. And I actually think that's true of any kind of creative work. If there's something you want to see exist and it doesn't exist, then you have to be the one to do it. And I think that can be applied to content. And I think very often what people do, because starting to create content is inherently vulnerable and scary and uncertain, they want to flock to the thing that they see as working, but then you're just derivative. Then you're just copying someone. Then you're probably just a second-rate version of something that's already been done 100 times. Whereas if you take the leap and say, what do I wish existed that I don't see yet? And just do that, chances are like you're going to be the first mover in that space. It's going to be more authentic to you. People are going to feel that energy and enthusiasm, right? Because that also matters a lot on social media. And so I think that's what I did. And I actually sat on this idea for a while. I kept thinking, I wish I saw more content covering female founded companies. Because a lot of business leaders and successful businesses tend to be led by men, a lot of business content kind of inadvertently ends up being very male focused. And I wish I saw more stories about female founded companies and brands and female founders and CEOs. And that's what I craved. And I didn't see it existing. And so I thought, why don't I just do it on TikTok? Because that seems like the lowest lift, right? Very low friction to do that. And then I really wasn't sure if it would work. But again, I think like what people tend to do is what's working, how can I copy it in order to kickstart my, success as a creator. But actually, I would recommend people do the opposite. What doesn't exist? What, like, if you could just create whatever content made your heart sing, regardless of whether or not it was proven out yet, then what would you do?
You said a couple minutes ago that is such a nice tie into this is when I asked you about Kris Jenner and you were saying, well, like to me, learning about her story and all these business principles, it was obvious, but I just decided to put it out anyway. I think it's called the curse of knowledge. And like once you learn it, you're like, oh, obviously everyone else knows it because I know it, so everyone else knows it. And you're saying the same thing here. It seemed obvious to me, but if it's a book that hasn't been written, there has to be other people that have the same feeling. How do you get around that element of, oh, this feels obvious, I'm not going to put it out? How do you decide what to put out when it's, let's call it so-called obvious versus when you feel it's not? Is there a line? Is there a threshold?
I think the filter needs to be, does it make you feel energized and alive? Does it excite you? Are you enthusiastic about it? Is it something that you can't shut up about? So I think everybody has, especially if you're a curious, intellectually curious person, everybody has something that they can't shut up to their friends about, right? Your friends are probably like, okay, enough, we get it. Take that thing and just post it on the internet because the internet will find your people. They will find the people who want more of that instead of being like, okay, enough about the D2C brands, enough about the celebrity brands, enough about venture capital, So I basically did a version of that where I took like the thing that I love talking to people about, but sometimes I'm like, all right, like I am overwhelming my friends. I'm going to post that on the internet and then it's going to find my people.
What just popped into my mind is almost, what if we create, instead of an Alcoholics Anonymous, it's almost like a Passionates Anonymous type thing, right? And you're like, are you dealing with too much passion on a topic and people hate you and people find you weird and annoying from it? Are you losing friends? We've got a program for you. Have you heard of TikTok? Have you heard of putting on content?
Do your friends want you to shut the fuck up? That's really good. You know what? That should be a video. Somebody should make that video.
We need to make this happen. It's funny. I know we laughed and now I'm going to take it to a little bit of a potential darker place. Those friends that are like, oh, that's so annoying. Oh, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? I don't get it. Ever since you started posting content and doing as well as you're doing, have you lost friends? Have you lost people because they don't understand what you're doing and why you're doing it and they don't support it because of the traditional background you came from?
That's a great question. No, if anything, I think a lot of like friends have become more interested in being friends. But no, I'm kidding. That's facetious. We can cut that part out.
Yeah, Dulma's not chasing clout at all. Holy shit! All right, I'm gonna end the interview there. I thought this person was of great character and would teach me a lot in the next hour. Guys, thank you so much for listening. That's it on the Creator Culture Podcast this week. The shortest episode we've ever had.
Oh my gosh, it's just Friday energy. Okay, let's try that again. So, Danny, that's a great question.
I think it was my second or third episode, and hopefully no one goes to listen to this after, but I feel like because I'm saying this, people will go listen to this after, is I had an interview with a guy that I respect a ton, a guy named Dan Runcie, in the music and business space. He sits at the intersection of music and business. Unbelievable writer, mind, personality, and had him on the pod. And this was early days where I didn't know what to ask. Should I come with questions? Should I not? And it ends up that at the end of the interview, my audio was screwed or something happened. So I was like, shit, I don't want to ask him again because he's a busy guy. I'm going to re-record my audio. And I try to bring enthusiastic energy whenever I'd re-record the question that, oh my God, if you listen to this episode, it's like me being like, amazing question. Yeah, okay, so The energy is so different.
Now I have to listen to it.
I have not listened to it ever since it came out. I'm too nervous to listen to that episode, but I'm down to stand by my work because there's a reason I put it out, but
That's so good. Okay, now I'm going to dig it up and I'm going to share it everywhere. But you know what? To that point about keeping your like cringe works online, I actually believe in that because here's the thing. Before I did 100 days of TikTok, I did 100 days of YouTube. You know, when you read an old journal from when you were younger and you're like, what the hell is this? A lot of that stuff is, I'm pretty sure, still up. And then all my early TikTok videos that are so random and throwing things against the wall, like all of that is still up. I have an intention behind keeping it up other than the fact that I'm too lazy to take it down, which is I want people to know, like, you immediately know what to post and it pops off, right? Like you stumble, you fumble, you like figure things out, you experiment, and that's okay. And that's part of being a creator, but it's also part of being an entrepreneur. It's part of carving your own path in life. It really is. You can't skip that part.
I think it's a mentality that you bring that is so valuable to this space right now. And I think it comes from the empathy and the understanding of running a business and how you just have to go through reps before you find your pocket. I find a lot of it because of TikTok, people will pop quick and it doesn't give people the opportunity to try this. Do I like it? Do I actually reflect? You're reflecting with this superficial filter because, oh, 1 million views. I guess I got to just keep going. I think what's so cool about hearing your story that you just alluded to is you went 100 days on YouTube. Cool. You tried some stuff out. Then 100 days on TikTok. And yes, you found a bit of a pocket. But I would even say today, like, there's not as much supposed fame as TikTok would maybe give someone else so quickly. Was that the mindset from the jump is I need to try so many different things and not put the pressure of making that thing income generating so that I can find my pocket? Or was it just more happenstance?
I never placed pressure on creating content to be monetized. Like that wasn't my goal because it just seemed kind of like out of my hands, honestly, that I didn't sort of like have that as an intention. I have always wanted the right audience to be able to share interesting ideas with, like a community of smart, ambitious women. And I think that is what I was trying to figure out. And I was trying to figure out, like, what are the various things I want to talk about? Because, like, I love business, but it's not the only thing I want to talk about, but I think it's the thing that makes most sense. So going back to me saying I'm not strategic and you calling me out and being like, that's bullshit, like, you're right. I was like, okay, of the various things I could talk about that are energizing to me, this is the most strategic thing. This is potentially the most useful thing. So let's kind of like really dig into that. So yeah, I didn't really try to make money per se. And I was really surprised when that started happening, but I always did want the right audience.
Let me ask you a question on this. So there's the vanity metrics of what works, right? You pop off on TikTok, people in the comments are saying, I love this, shares and all that good stuff. There's the opposite side of you don't get any distribution. Oh, maybe that's not the right idea. Like, what's the filter? What are the decision criteria that you go through to know outside of vanity, is this still right for me? Or do I kind of sabotage the momentum I have and try something else?
I feel like it's so timely that you're asking me that because I woke up this morning with this like creator crisis thinking about that exact question because I've been feeling like, okay, I want to keep talking about business, but I don't want it to be all I talk about. But then I feel so scared because I feel like, well, this is what people like and expect. Like I'm going to push them away if I dare to incorporate anything else. But it's like being an entrepreneur and iterating, right? You also need to like iterate to keep things fresh for yourself and keep things sustainable for yourself. And I also feel like at this point, I can maybe strategically bring in the right things, the right elements of what I personally want to talk about that's a little bit deeper because it'll help fortify the relationship I have with people who really love my content. So I actually think that those are not opposing things in the way that I'm afraid of. Like I am noticing like, wow, that is scary. And I haven't been creating content that long, just a year, but like I've been posting content like almost every day, like multiple times a day for an entire year. So that is quite a body of content, but it's all been in this one niche. But if I have to do it indefinitely and just talk about Kim Kardashian's new business ventures, I don't think I would be very fulfilled down the road. You know, it's the starting off point.
Yeah. If you were to be in the position that you're in right now, but instead of creating content, you're creating a product, back when you were the entrepreneur building your D2C business, what would the advice be? Oh, I actually don't know if this is the product I really want to build, but it's doing well. Now I've gone through it. How would you have advised yourself?
For an actual like D2C founder, for example?
Let's say a D2C founder, again, doing well, solid momentum, but they're like, you know what, actually, this is not the route I want to be known for. And not on the content side, but more so on the product side. How would you, as someone who has a lot of experience, is valued in that community in both your perspective and your experience, how would you approach it?
I have to say, Danny, you ask the most interesting like fresh questions. I haven't really thought about a lot of these things that you've asked. So I really appreciate that. Side note.
Thank you. And that's also why I don't send questions beforehand, because it's the flavor, a little flavor on top. No, I appreciate that.
Got to keep them on their toes. So I think everybody has varying degrees of clarity around what they want long-term. What is their long-term vision for their lives? What do they want? What's their 10-year, 5-year, 10-year plan? But if you can set aside some time to develop some clarity around that, that will help you reverse engineer to what makes sense now. So if you have a very clear idea of like, this is what I want to be known for, and some random thing that you do pops off, and that happens on a micro scale with content all the time, where like I just mentioned earlier, like I posted this random video that was facetious and probably like a little off color, and that took off. And I was like, wait, I don't want to be known for this, and I don't want the algorithm to encourage me to post more of this. So I like archived it. I think like that is the filter. But then also sometimes it's okay to acquire more resources in order to be able to then do the thing that you want. I think that's fine.
Acquire more resources to do the thing that you want to do. And I feel like I ask this question all the time. It came from a little backstory. I went to a talk in New York. Maggie Rogers and Questlove were getting interviewed by some staff writer at the New Yorker. And Questlove started talking about self-sabotage as an artist. And I was like, I got to ask every single creator this question. You talk about until you have enough resources. Like, does resources equate to leverage in terms of like the next thing you want to do? Is that what you mean by that?
I think it could. So I think it's a very case by case thing. And I think there's also a slippery slope where people are like, oh, I'm going to do the soul crushing work in order to eventually be able to do what I want or make an impact. Like that can be a slippery slope. But at the same time, the example that comes to mind, and this may be again, like a little bit of a risque example, is do you know Aubrey Marcus?
That name sounds familiar, but I can't put any knowledge to it.
Yeah. So he has a podcast. He's like if Tim Ferriss took way more shrooms and were way more of a hippie and went to Burning Man way more. Like he is like very business, very hippie, very spiritual, and also like super jacked and talks about fitness a lot. And he has business that does really well. It's called On It. And they sell all these supplements, good quality supplements. But before that, the thing that helped him make money in the beginning was, do you know... I can't believe Danny, this is the first time I've ever thought I would bring this up on a podcast. But do you know Fleshlights?
Was that him?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
I'm shutting down every single question that just popped into my mind, even though this could be so interesting. So this is the dude that created Fleshlights, and now he's got a podcast and he's got On It.
And not only does he have a podcast, it's very spiritual. It's very personal development oriented. It's very about like, you know, higher consciousness, etc. So you wouldn't necessarily assume that that's kind of how he got his start, like in terms of entrepreneurially. And even me, right? Like it's funny that I talk so much about celebrities now because I'm so actively disinterested in celebrity gossip, celebrity drama, celebrity news. I have zero interest and I actually don't know enough about them. And sometimes that can cause issues because I don't know glaringly obvious things that people who follow pop culture do know. I just know the business side. So sometimes the door is unexpected.
This reminds me, I was watching a talk with Colin and Samir and Hassan Minhaj, because Hassan went from, like he was posting a lot on YouTube in 2012, 13 and such. Then he went to the Daily Show. And so every day, Monday to Friday, he's there, he's creating content, he's creating skits and such. Then he creates Homecoming King, his first big Netflix special. Then he creates Patriot Act, which is like 6 seasons of every single week on Netflix. And then he kind of takes a step back. 4 years later, now he creates The King Jester. And Colin asked an interesting question of, how do you think about pacing? Like you went from posting and creating content essentially every single day, and now you've taken a step back, and it's 4 years, and now you're putting out the thing that matters the most. It sounds like with him and with some creators, again, you do everything you need to get to a point of leverage, or as you were saying, you get your resources, and then it's cool. I can step back now. I can really focus on that project.
I see that a lot with musical artists, right? You kind of have to play the game. You kind of have to like, Beyonce does a lot of interesting things now, a lot of interesting philanthropic initiatives and whatnot. And I admire that so much. But she talks about explicitly in interviews how she had to really just like play the game and do the things that were successful in a popular sense in order to get to the point where now she can create whatever artistic work she wants or do the philanthropic things that she wants.
Okay, going back a couple minutes, you talked about what do you want to be known for, essentially? Like you were saying, like if you kind of project in the future, what do you want to be known for? You can kind of reverse engineer if you have that state. What do you want to be known for?
I want to be like the trusted friend that smart young women turn to to learn about business and to learn about career stuff, and mainly those things. I feel like we have a lot of prominent female voices like Call Her Daddy or Tanks that talk about sex and relationships, and that's cool, but we don't have that in business really. So that's what I would want.
When you were growing up, who were the inspirations? Did you find someone that kind of sparked this interest, or was it similar to what we were talking about earlier? There was a book that you wanted to read, hadn't been written, and you're like, screw it, I need to write it. I got to be the person.
Yeah, it was kind of that. And I think like the reason I'm laughing is because the only person that comes to mind is Alexander Hamilton. I was like really obsessed with him when I was 13. I was a very weird child. Danny, you're bringing out all the like weird, embarrassing parts of me that I don't usually share in interviews.
I wish this was a live audience. I'd ask right now, okay, who still thinks Dulma's weird? Like that'd be the question I'd ask right now.
Everybody just unfollows.
Dulma Alton is stagnant at 95,000 followers on TikTok for life. Enjoy those 95,000 because you're not going above it.
So that's exactly like what I wanted is, I think as a kid, I was always very ambitious and very driven, and maybe it's like an immigrant chip on my shoulder thing, but I was looking for role models and I couldn't find a lot who were women in like the spaces that I looked at, but I did find Alexander Hamilton.
So Alexander Hamilton at 13, but I want to know this because I'm really interested in curiosity. I'm really interested in chasing passion, how that stuff comes to be. Why Alexander Hamilton? Where did that come from? Who inspired that for you?
I think like in the 8th grade in some history class, we just learned about him. And for whatever reason, I don't really know what was going on in my little 13-year-old brain at the time, but I was like, oh, he was also an immigrant. He also didn't have a father. He also was really smart, good at writing, good language skills. Like he came to, at the time it was the colonies, not the States, but he came to America and then he made a name for himself and he was really ambitious and he really shaped the future of this company, or not this company, this country, hashtag capitalism. So I think a lot of that resonated. And then I think at the time I was 13. So I had spent the last several years kind of going back and forth between Mongolia and the States and California. And I think that also really shaped my identity. And I was having like a little bit of like an identity crisis around, what am I? Am I Mongolian? Am I American? And I'm an immigrant. What's my culture? You know? So I think his story resonated. It's something I learned about at the right time. And then I got his like massive biography and I got really into it.
Was that you hearing about him and then going on your own journey to explore who he was? Or was that a teacher and the way that she or him or they or whatever presented the information?
It really wasn't. It was almost like there was just like one kind of like paragraph that dove into his backstory in our history text, but it somehow like caught my eye and I kind of became obsessed with it. So then I pursued my own little rabbit hole of learning about him. And that was a lot of what I did when I was a kid, but definitely not the way he was presented.
Okay, well, this is such a nice segue, and this kind of makes a lot of sense now, looking at how you learn it and what happened. The thing that I'm so bullish on for the future is that like creators as educators. When I was in high school, I had no interest because there was just no one inspiring me. But if I followed someone like yourself, for example, imagine someone who's 16, 17 comes across your TikTok, and I've seen some stuff like this in your comments, being like, oh, this is so interesting how she's helping me view business. And I know your tagline is
TikTok B School for Women. Yeah.
Exactly. I think that's insanely powerful. Talk to me about the education side. What's the impact that you've had on people? Have you been hit up by professors? I know you went to Brown. Has Brown hit you up to say, come speak, come lecture with us again?
That would be pretty dope. No, Brown has not done that. Probably it would be cool to reach out to them. I'm actually going to talk to a group at Columbia Business School soon, but the educational component is really important to me because I think there are some TikTok pages that are kind of accidental, right? Like to what we were saying before, they stumble upon something and then they kind of just double down on it and it becomes the thing kind of organically. And I did that too, but now I really want to take that B School concept. And by the way, TikTok B School is a phrase that one of my followers, one of my very sort of like loyal, engaged followers, first commented. They were like, I just love your stuff. It's like TikTok B School. And I was like, wait, I love that. I'm going to take that and run with it. And I really want people to like know that that is the level of kind of dedication I have to the page and like the level of like quality I want to bring. I am one person. I'm not like a whole institution, but that's sort of like how seriously I take it. And that's the intention behind it is like, I really want it to be a resource for education because the other thing I care about deeply is not only providing insights to people in the industry or providing insightful tips to people who are just small business owners starting out, but also everybody outside of business and entrepreneurship and tech who want to just feel more empowered as citizens in a capitalist society. I actually care a lot about that. And I want them to feel like, oh, this isn't just this intimidating black box. I understand what private equity is now, or venture capital, or whatever, and that is just as important to me.
I think that's so cool, truly, because there's the stories and the anecdotes that I always get so jealous of whenever I hear this of, oh, how did you get into enter field that famous or well-known person got into? And they're like, oh, it was my 8th grade X teacher who helped me see the world of X. And I never had that growing up, but I'm like, oh, this is so cool what creators can do. Like creators can fill that gap. I hate school. I'm on TikTok. Oh, I come across Dulma's page. Dulma's talking about all these concepts. Now I want to go to business school because I understand versus like, oh, it's the thing to do. Maybe it opens whatever these doors are in the world that everyone talks about. I think that's so, so powerful. It's like a cheap way to explore curiosity and a category without having to put $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 to it.
Totally, yeah. And also those $70,000 to get an MBA, they're not going to teach you much. It's just a networking thing anyway, and you collect the little badge of whatever that brand name of the school is, and then you're in debt, and then you move on with your life. So,
well, since you're so enterprising as an individual and you're a great content creator, where does this go in terms of, is there a course in mind for those people that feel like this world's a black box to provide that so-called education in more of a concentrated way?
So what I was doing before I started creating this content, and the reason I know so much about the kinds of businesses I cover and the world of venture and D2C and whatnot, is because I was running a business that created courses. We would bring in outside experts, instructors, and they were the subject matter experts. And then we would package their knowledge into a workshop or a course or whatever. And then we would share that with the women in our community. And so I've done that before. I actually think there are limits to how much you can scale that kind of thing. What I would love to do is keep a lot of the content open and free and accessible to everyone. And then if there is a more sort of like monetized component, I would want it to be more likely a fund, like actually fund some businesses or incubate businesses. Yeah.
How often do you get reached out to by followers or people in your audience saying, like, I want to learn more about X. Where should I go? Oh, this is so interesting. What else can I do to go deeper?
I actually think a lot of those requests tend to be in the comments and sometimes in my DMs, but usually people who are reaching out to me either via Instagram DM or via email, they have different requests. It's more like, do you offer consulting, or do you want to work on this project together, or can you advise us, or what have you. So those kinds of questions tend to be in the comments more.
And as someone that went through a traditional and strong Ivy League education system, little entrepreneurship, now in your content realm, no right or wrong answer, but do you feel there's a world where creators partner with professors and educators because you guys are unbelievable storytellers, which is usually the miss with professors?
That's a really interesting point. I don't know enough about academia to say, but my guess, if I had to hazard a guess, would be that professors are kind of constrained by the institutions of academia, and academia would probably find creators who are doing that to be more of a threat or a competitive, force rather than distribution, because what they want is to kind of solidify this air that they can provide something that nobody else can, especially as they get more expensive, right? So I think there's probably an opportunity for that if people had more of like a win-win mentality, but I think the incentives are probably misaligned.
You talk about a bunch of different topics, yet business is more so like the core focus. How do you decide what to talk about next? Is it pure like a passion thing, whatever catches your interest? Is it a bit more systematic and strategic?
It's a little of both. I take into account requests that I get. I take into account what's timely in the news, where I can find an interesting angle. I'm no longer interested in just covering a brand for the sake of it. I want to have an interesting angle that I want to pull out of it. Plus, am I interested in it? Like, do I feel excited about it?
So then I have to ask, because you talk about this a lot, you're definitely a thought leader when it comes to the idea of celebrity built brands. I guess now it's more so like that creator packaged goods. I think Drew talks about that and other people in the space, maybe Andrea Hernandez talks about it. Now that you've been thinking about it for so long, it feels like we're in this bubble. It's so easy to be like, every creator should start a business. Every influencer should start a business. What would you say? Now that you've thought about it and you think about it a lot, what are the, huge head shake. Talk to me about that. What's that feeling there?
My gut reaction is simplistic. The true answer is more nuanced. It's more case by case. But overall, we have a lot of influencer brands and a lot of celebrity brands, and the space is very saturated, especially in the core categories that are high margin, very aspirational, like beauty, like, booze or whatever. There are certain kinds of verticals that have a lot of celebrity brands in them, talent-led brands. And I think there are just too many. A lot of them are undifferentiated. A lot of them are banking on the fact that the public will want to just kind of buy a piece of that celebrity in a way. It's almost like merch, right? It's glorified merch. And we don't really need more of that. We don't really need more of those derivative products and waste, frankly, in like the ecosystem. That being said, I think if you know that you're launching a merch and it's a community building thing and you want to create that for your most devoted fans, then that's okay. But trying to shill something that is glorified merch onto the broader public, that's a waste of resources. And I think it's ultimately not going to succeed anyway. You're putting in all that time because you think it's going to be easy money, but because there's so many celebrity brands out there today, a lot of people are now increasingly skeptical. So having a famous name slapped onto a brand is now increasingly more of a liability because people are so cynical about them, and rightfully so.
And of the people that you speak to and the research that you've done, how often is it that the creator, the celebrity, actually wants to start the business? Like that's their next step versus it's like, oh, manager's like, here's an opportunity. And you're like, I can make an extra $5 million a year. Yeah, whatever. Let's do it.
Yeah, I think it's probably a combination. And I think you can tell when that talent is actually invested in like creating something. They have a point of view on what that product should be. They have personal opinions on innovating in that category. They want to be, hands-on and involved. So people can actually tell, but I think it's few and far between. I think more often it's sort of one of those things where a bunch of people come together and they're like pitching that talent on spinning up a brand, slapping their name onto it, and they promise that it'll make them money, but actually it's probably not going to go anywhere.
Maybe this is the creator space in general right now, but specifically on creator talent-led brands, it almost feels like the dot-com bubble. Like now there's this opportunity. It's so easy to start it. So everyone's kind of starting it, but it feels like power laws are going to come into play soon where it's just not possible for everyone to have this mass success that seems like the media kind of touts. Like, oh, this is the new wave, but is it really the new wave?
Yeah, I think we're on the tail end of it. It's kind of like a few decades ago, celebrity fragrances were the thing, right? Like licensing your name out to some sort of fragrance company and they would spin up a bunch of like scents for you. That used to be the thing. And I think we just generally have these waves of, oh, this is the new way that celebrities and influencers diversify. More recently influencers, because that's a new thing. But we have these waves of things that become the way that celebrities can make more income or acquire more equity. But the problem is they always get so saturated. And then the ones who are like the last to enter, they don't actually get to benefit from that upside. And then everybody's on to the next.
I'm going to swing it a very different way. I'm going to give you something and you're going to tell me about it. Okay? Peanut butter.
You did your homework. So it would be not an exaggeration to say that my love of peanut butter is a personality trait at this point, maybe one of my very few personality traits. I just love it so much. And there are these very specific products called Perfect Bars from a brand called Perfect that I have almost every single day, to the point where my best friend made me a painting of a Perfect Bar for my birthday recently. And then one of my other friends found their booth at an exhibit and told them I was a fan. So they reached out to me and said, we heard you're a fan. We're going to send you some PR, which might have been the best day of my life. So I just love Perfect Bars and peanut butter. Now people know that I'm very, very weird. Like this interview is very unflattering.
I'll say one weird thing on that. I was hiking in New Zealand with my cousin before the pandemic. Day hits, super rainy. We can't do anything. Sit inside. I wrote a whole business plan of a peanut butter brand that like I'm still waiting to deploy. It's a whole different conversation.
Oh my God, Danny, please let me be a co-founder.
Honestly, I have like such conviction around this, but I'll talk to you about it after. So 5 quick questions to end off. A little rapid fire. First one is, where are you your most creative? What environment are you in to be your most creative?
Around other creative people, and it doesn't matter geographically where, it just matters who I'm around.
Okay. What is the most impactful book that you've read to this day?
The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle.
Okay. Cool. Third, if you were to give a TED Talk, what would the title be, or what would you talk about?
It would be about the importance of human creativity.
I like this. Question 4. And 4 and 5 are similar with a bit of nuance. Who is a creator that you feel is underrated?
I don't know that she's underrated, but I just love her. Kardashian Colloquium on TikTok is great. She does these very sort of like academic, cerebral analyses. Yeah.
Okay. So similar question, but now a little bit more personal. Who's a creator right now that you would invest in for the future?
Ooh, Ooh, that is good. I don't know if I know people who are like up and coming. I mean, I love anybody who talks about business. So like the guys behind Acquired FM, Colin and Samir, Mario Gabriele. Yeah.
Well, that's that. It has been a pleasure. I've learned a ton. I think I can create a whole TikTok account around the stuff that you gave me. And it's like an investigative journalism element. But thank you for coming on.
Okay.
It's been a pleasure. And we'll catch you soon.